Hello, everybody. Welcome to episode 49 of Korea. No, I'm trying to talk. So, a lot's happened as usual, and by a lot I mean literally 3 tournaments: LPL, LSPL. We won't be talking about LSPL so far. We'll be talking about it once the regular season has ended. So that'll be next week, I think. Um, so with that, we have Demacia Cup and we have LPL. And first topic will be LGD. All right, so let's start off with LGD here. Great, inconsistent. Who wants to start off the discussion? Oh, actually, you don't have a choice.
Look at this volunteers jump up.
Yeah. You don't have a choice, Emma.
Okay, cool.
Okay.
So LGD, I mean, I think, it stinks because we get this argument, I feel, every week, or like I argue with some people every week about LGD's placement in terms of how people think of them as like whether they're a top team because of where they are in the standings. I think they're a lot better than what their position suggests. Although one thing that stuck out to me when I was looking through, like, just pulling statistics and looking at LGD as a team is that technically overall they have like almost a 50% record, like if you're not including points. If you're just including, it's like 46%. And in those games, the like of the games that they've won, TBQ, and I know I harp on him all the time, but here we go again. TBQ has played Lee Sin 7 times, and he has a 100% win rate, which is like so ridiculous. Like on every other champion, like Rek'Sai is like 25%. Let me see, like, what was the other one? Sejuani, and I don't even think he's like a bad Sejuani, to be honest. But like, I actually think TBQ is fine on that champion, but it's only like a 20%. It's absolutely ridiculous, the difference when they put him on Lee Sin as when they don't put him on Lee Sin. And like, I think a lot of other things can be attributed to like PYL coming back and then regaining their synergy. Obviously, kind of they went 1 and 3 for their first sets, and when PYL wasn't with the team, and those are games that I'm sure they'd like to have back, even if they're going to be like trying and testing things out. It still would have been another week where they could have done that. Because like when I think of their record, I actually just almost completely throw out those games. Like, unfortunately they count, but like they weren't the same team. Like, they're losing games with PYL is still completely different than losing games without PYL. But like the TBQ win rate is just staggering. Like, they cannot find another champion for him to have nearly as much impact on as Lee Sin. And it's, I mean, I can't say that teams are like specifically targeting it even, but it's really like, if there's one thing that jumps out to me and is super concerning for LGD, it's that they can't jungle such an important position, and they can't get their jungler to be make any sort of impact on a champion that's not Lee Sin.
All right. Well, do you think that's true? Do you think that's the case? Do you think with any other champion, like it feels like kind of a revolving door every season? It's always the same. People always question whether or not he's really buffed up his champion pool, and he can play a lot of champions, except the amount he is able to play the champions. The mechanics, like, he presses the buttons properly. He's just not in the right place sometimes, making the right decisions a lot of the times.
He can jungle, he just doesn't.
He like Rek'Sai ults across the map and just dies.
So Michael, LGD, do you think it's a problem in the sense that do you think TBQ is one of the only issues that's plaguing the team, or do you think it's something else adding to it?
I think TBQ is a large part of it, but I wouldn't peg him as the only issue. I feel like in comparison to last season, and again, like, this is within the context of the fact that LGD always seems a bit off in the regular season compared to playoffs, so I'm still holding out for them. And as mentioned earlier, like, the standings are all like really close, so it's kind of hard to tell who would beat who on any given day. They did split both of their sets this week, so but I don't know, I feel like the problem I see with LGD is that maybe they're like overcommitted to plans, because I never see them really do okay. They're either like really, really good or really, really bad. And I actually feel like there was a few games this week where PYL wasn't actually playing particularly well either. I don't know if it was a miscommunication thing or not,
Hmm.
but yeah, I don't think it's just him. I think it's like I don't think it's just TBQ. I think it's like a bit of the team as a whole. I still think that in terms of like how they team fight and play together, it's still they still have some like really smart ideas, like the way that Wayless is utilizing 80 carries for the team, like Varus, and like their team play is actually really good and stuff like this. So like there's times where like there's like little brilliant moments, like for instance Imp would use blue trinket and like Wayless would follow up with like arrows over walls and stuff, so like use temporary vision to poke him down before fights. So they still have stuff like that, but and their macro game is usually really good. So LGD still comes across as like the smartest team, but I don't know, I feel like sometimes their individual play is lacking a little bit, but it's not like on a consistent basis. It's like it seems to be on and off. So
Yeah.
but yeah, I still think TBQ is like a big issue, and I don't understand why they have such a huge talent level on the team and still have him on the team when these issues have had like literally years to flush themselves out. But I don't know.
And LGD has had more than just like PYL showing up late. They've had Wayless being unable to practice as much under doctor order because of problems with his wrist. They've had recently Imp had a little bit of a problem with his visa. He had to, like, they were struggling with it this week. They were actually practicing Godv as ADC just in case in some of their scrims because he had an issue where he stayed too long in China during the grace period. So he had to go to the visa office just to get it sorted out so that he didn't run into problems later.
Yeah, and it's obviously a problem when you have like your injured player subbing for Imp.
Yeah.
So
But, I mean, they still won a game off Qiao Gu with that lineup, so...
yeah.
And again, they were playing Sivir there because Sivir aids in rotational play, and it's a big weakness of Qiao Gu. So, I mean, we've seen in the past LGD is able to compensate. I almost feel like we are really hard on TBQ, but he's also part of the reason why they're so good, right? Is because they have to kind of be more inventive and creative to compensate for some of his issues. Whereas I feel like if they had a strong jungler, they could just play the same style that a lot of other LPL teams play, and maybe they'd still be same in the standings, but they'd lack some of the macro understandings of the early game lane swap power that I think, and like their ability to go for their correct objectives later, and kind of frazzle, for example, unlimited potential in that series. Like, Apollo got so freaked out that he decided to suicide or something. I don't know. He was like, "Oh, must split push."
Yeah, I mean, I think
I
think it is true that to some extent, like TBQ does formulate the team to work together to compensate for his errors, especially like he's a little more self-sufficient nowadays, but like LGD used to just kind of like follow him around and to make plays and stuff like that to make sure he doesn't fuck up. But at the same time, I don't necessarily think that's all on TBQ. I think that's partially PYL planning around TBQ because like we saw TBQ on LGD without PYL for that week, and it was like completely different. So I don't know.
I like how the one game they won, he played Lee Sin and like stepped up to carry. He was like, "We're winning this game."
Yeah,
We're not gonna go win that.
And so anybody who doesn't understand the context in which, like for instance, Godby playing AD carry, like the Demacia Cup games did have a rematch between LGD and Qiao Gu, and LGD took the match set pretty cleanly, 3-1. So that was fun. So yeah, Emily, what were you about to say?
Oh no, I was just gonna say, like, I think for me, it's more, I really want, because, so probably a bit of my own bias, but, like, I really love LGD, and I want them to be a team that, like, can go to Worlds and do well. And I think I just see, and I know I always harp on this, but I just see the jungle matchup as something that's, like, super, super important. So once you get into, like, once they get into playoffs, and once they get into possibly an international setting, like how well they'll do then with TBQ on the team, which is why I think like I am so hard on him. I agree that their like actual play style right now and the way, like, for example, Godby like kind of morphed into a player who plays like so much more for the team. The way they use their two top laners, I think, is like really, really smart. And like stuff like that. The way Imp has developed, actually, Like, I'm honestly like more impressed with him in China than I was with him in on Samsung White, and he was obviously like really, really good when he was on that team. So I think the team as a whole, like, it's kind of fantastic how like PYL has kind of guided them and how they have learned to compensate for each other's like errors or each other's weak points. Like when LGD is at their strongest, that's what they're doing, and like that's how they've come to evolve. And when they show those like moments of brilliance, it's because they're really aware of what their weak points are, and so they try to leverage specific strengths or adjust their play style so that they can cover them. And I think that's awesome. Like that's actually why I really like watching them. But like I guess it's my fault because like I can't help imagine like, but now take that team like as they are now, everything they've learned, and then give them like a good jumper, because that would just be like godly, right? Like they'd be so amazing.
Yep.
And it's funny that you mentioned Wayless, because another point I wanted to make is that they also have a 100% win rate, I think, with him playing Ahri, because Ahri allows him to effectively be a second jungler, to have more roaming pressure. I think he's very good with the Varus, but I think that because Varus is so, like, the purpose of Varus is kind of to sit in lane and just constantly clear the waves. Like, that's what makes Varus so strong, is that you can't effectively take his tower, but like if he has to roam, then they lose a lot of pressure. If he doesn't roam, then they lose a lot of the map pressure that Godby usually provides with his playstyle. So there's some elements of that too. So even though Ahri isn't super popular right now, LGD has been very successful with it because of the way that Godby plays it.
Yeah, so I guess we probably spoke about LGD a bit much, and I think it's a good idea to kind of waft over to the Qiao Gu transition.
Yeah.
Waft
I mean,
over.
That took a while. I was like, oh,
Wow.
are you
Wow.
slow motion dodging bullets?
a
Like what are you
spell
doing there,
or
Raz?
something.
Yeah, Michael?
I mean, I will say that I'm not overly concerned with LGD because there's so many things working against them right now that I don't think will be plaguing them come playoffs. Like, I mean, just with the visa issues, the injury, and the whole regular season thing, and plus they started on a penalty, essentially, they started penalized because they had a week without PYL, so with all of those things considered, I really don't have too much worry for LGD. And also, simply just because there's not really much consistency in the other teams that I'm too worried about them in a best-of series, so that's another thing.
Everybody splits.
So that's why I want to transition.
Except for
to
M30,
Qiao Gu,
apparently.
'cause-
Except for M3.
Literally everyone split this week except for
They
M30.
like skyrocket
Snake also,
out there.
yeah.
Well, yeah,
So, yeah,
well,
I
I meant,
wanna-
yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah, I just want to
There were
transition to
two
like Qiao Gu.
sets.
God damn it,
Yeah,
Kelsey!
that's
God damn it!
Qiao Gu!
No. So Qiao Gu, what's
Qiao
happening
Gu.
anyway? So Qiao Gu.
What happened?
Where do we rank them? Because this is a good question on the basis we spoke about this a little bit already about the idea of macro play and how do we rank a team like Qiao Gu, which is who are second place, compared to let's say LGD or Vici that have a better understanding of macro play, but kind of dipping. So let's go backwards. Michael, let's start with you.
I don't know. I think I mean, I want to say that Qiao Gu isn't the second best team, but the problem is like the teams that are directly behind them are so wildly inconsistent that I can't possibly rank them above them even at like a peak level. Just because, like, sure, IG on a really good day, I'd probably still put them in second place, but just there's so many times where they just don't close properly or they just look like they don't give a shit genuinely. And Snake does like a lot of weird things where they like they've tried to make poke work and a bunch of other shit which never worked out for them, so I can't really place them up there. And then there's Masters 3, who's Masters 3. So, I mean, none of those teams can be ahead of Qiao Gu right now. But
Go ahead, sir.
I think Snake is better than
Yeah,
I think Snake is better when they're not experimenting, but
The thing with me
When they
with
decide
Snake,
Sion Jungle is the prime option, you just
like
start
the,
to question yourself.
the thing with me with
Sion
Snake is that, like Edward Gaming last year, they always have this U factor. So if they fall a ridiculous amount behind, like the fact that you can team fight from behind on his strongest champions means that like their games might be sloppy and a train wreck, but they will have the ability to always at least split 1-1, like if they really care enough to just play the comp, do what they're strong about. And that gives them some measure of...
Yeah, I mean, I also think just Beast not playing things that aren't safe anymore. Yes, would be great too. So, I guess in fairness, Snake does appear to be second best, but
I was gonna say they also like the thing I do like about Snake, and I guess I can compare this to Qiao Gu a little bit, but like this, even when they are experimenting, I do think, and a lot of this is what Kelsey talked about with you. I think they actually make like they oddly make better decisions like the later the game goes on. So even though like they'll do really weird random stuff and like Flandre will have these absolute horrible builds that like make you want to kind of like just shake him. Like it's like as soon as they hit like that late game, suddenly their team fighting is like really good and they make really good decisions around objectives. So I think, I don't know, maybe I just want to root for Snake too, but I have hope for them. I've really enjoyed watching them experiment around. And Qiao Gu, in comparison, I see them as a team that actually is a lot stronger than I thought they'd be. I thought they'd have like a little bit more trouble doing well in the LPL, but I think they have a problem when opponents try to abuse their weaknesses in their macro play, like especially around how they play in lane swaps. So I think going into the second half of the season, Qiao Gu can be a top team, but they need to address some of those like incredible weaknesses in their play. Like I think LGD really exposed in both the Demacia Cup set and then their split set. They exposed a lot of key weaknesses, I think, in what Qiao Gu's like kind of struggles with.
In commenting on Qiao Gu, their blue side win rate got blown open this week, right? Because they never lost a blue side game, and I was looking at maybe why this might be, and I found that on blue side they actually tend to first pick bottom laners, particularly like Sivir and Kalista. Which, first of all, right off the bat, like 5 of their 11 blue side wins were Sivir or Kalista picks, and those give you boost in rotational play on Sivir and objective control on Kalista, which is something that they might struggle with otherwise. And then they will pick like bottom laners like Janna that give them bonus move speed, things like that. They've actually first picked Janna. Like, this is the thing that they've done. And whereas if their red side first rotations tend to be more focused on like getting a jungler and a top laner, which is an interesting thing to notice. I don't know.
I do think like for what was predicted of Qiao Gu, they've done well and exceeded expectations, just because like I know that when Qiao Gu first entered LPL, my issue was like, okay, they're really strong individually, and I don't think they'll be top 4, but they'll make playoffs. But I mean, because everybody thought that they couldn't do well because they lacked the level of macro play that's kind of like lacking when they're LSPL practice. But they've actually done really well considering what everybody had to say about them before they entered. So
yeah.
And I think part of that is their team fighting has been really good on champions with a little bit more jungle champions with a little bit more durability. Because the reason why they were bad at team fighting in LSPL is I always thought that the engagement sense of Swift was off, so he would go in a little early and die. But if he's playing like a Sejuani or a Rek'Sai, like his most picked champion in LSPL was Nidalee, so that was a problem. And he would just like dive into 5 people. It's like, oh, there goes that team fight.
Qiao Gu's team fight was so off. And not even off, it was just like never ending. Because it was just like, okay, well, he died. Okay, they'll try again. They'll try another team fight. Okay, well, that one was successful. And so their success rate in team fights would actually mean something because they would have enough team fights in a game for for that statistic to actually matter. And it was like it was a bit awful, but fun to watch. I suppose.
Fun.
It's fun to watch.
So that's. That's a little bit of my concern because the jungle meta is allowing more of these assassin champions in, and he has played Italy since the changes, and I don't think he won that game. But I will say though that the fact that their team fighting is good with that caveat has done a lot for them and has given them more diversity than they previously had. So I don't think they're in as bad of a position in terms of diversity as Snake was, for example, last year, where they're just going to be completely blown open in the playoffs, but I think they will have some trouble.
So this is where the real question comes, because obviously Worlds is coming up soon, and for the most part teams, it is actually. For the most part teams right now are experimenting, not trying, but some teams are trying really hard, so it's really difficult to get an idea of which teams are showing their true strength, which teams are just kind of, I guess, kind of coasting into playoffs. So, last split, we had Snake. They were a team that obviously had a lot of flaws, and so there's a lot of comparisons in the fact that both teams were second place. Both teams showed a lot of strength in terms of team fighting. But how would you compare them in the sense that I feel like, how would you compare them, like, side by side, let's say? Let's start with Emily.
I think Snake had a lot more exploitable flaws, like just beginning in Champion Select. I mean, we talked about, or you guys talked about this, I didn't really talk about it, but previously on China Talk, you kept bringing up the fact, like, okay, Snake, they're really easily banned out. Like, Beast really only plays, like, Nunu and Jarvan. Baka can only do really well on 2 champions. And so you could actually target them really easily in Champion Select. And teams just didn't, because either they were experimenting or they didn't take them seriously or whatever. And then by the time playoffs came around, they couldn't address any of those weaknesses, and like some of them were just flat out like you know, you can't, like, a Baka literally could not learn more than 2 champions. Then that wasn't something that they could address during the regular season, so they went into playoffs and then just got completely crushed. I don't see the same thing with Qiao Gu. I think their weaknesses are still in, like, their macro play. But I think that overall as a team, they have a better understanding of, I guess, different strategies, objective control. They have a lot more leeway when it comes to picking team compositions. And that's obviously, like, a huge difference than what Snake was previous split. So I think... I think they have some, like, obvious weaknesses that they need to work on. I don't think they're not in as dire straits as, like, Snake going into playoffs last year. I was like, oh my gosh, they're just gonna get completely, or last split, they're just gonna get completely run over. Yeah. And I don't see the same thing with Qiao Gu. I think they can actually give people a run for their money. I don't think that they'll make, like, finals the way they are now, but I do think they could win in quarters for sure.
So here's the real... Oh, yeah, Kelsey, yeah.
Most of Qiao Gu's players are better than Snake's players were last split, with the exception of, like, top and support, and they have more flexibility and champion diversity and just the ability to outplay 1v1.
Yeah.
Also.
There we go.
I'd agree with that.
Okay, perfect. So here's... Leading into this question, which was, Snake had a larger issue going into this, but... one good thing that I felt like Snake really had, and I guess a question or a challenge that Qiao Gu is going to meet later on, is the ability to grow. From LSPL to LPL and from the spring split to summer split, we've seen a lot of growth from Snake. And I guess an amazing understanding of what was wrong with them, be it either roster issues, stylistic issues, or just simple, like, I guess, perhaps a little bit of macro play. So... do you think that this team, Qiao Gu, has learned much, or do you believe that they will learn? I guess that's looking too much into the future, but do you think they've learned anything from, at least from LSPL to LPL?
I can't say much in terms of LSPL just because I haven't watched much LSPL, but in terms of the start of the split, while I can't say they made leaps and bounds, made leaps and bounds of progress in macro play, I do think that their team fighting is a lot cleaner than when it started. Because before, it just seemed like they would do really well in lanes, but even their team fighting wasn't all that great, but now it does seem like they're doing a lot better in that aspect. So even though they might not outsmart teams in a best of 5 like EDG with their top lineup or LGD, I do think that they shouldn't have trouble against other teams strictly off of their team fighting. I think it's good enough, and their individual play is some of the top in the league right now.
And I think also one thing I've noticed that they've been doing lately is that even if they have like a good 2v2, they'll just lane swap because I think they're practicing that. Like they just seem to lane swap almost every game because in their LSPL run, they didn't actually get a lot of lane swap practice, just because their 2v2 was so good. So that's something that tells me like they would lane swap without like, I think it was like Sivir, the enemy team had Sivir and like a much better fast push composition, and then like they got lucky because the enemy team just froze. It was really awkward, but it wasn't a situation where they should have lane swapped, and they lane swapped. So they seem to be lane swapping with great frequency and taking like Tristanas and trying to execute those sorts of compositions. So they're working on their macro strategy.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah, I was gonna say like from what I remember.
Go on.
Oh no, I was just gonna say from what I remember them in the LSPL, like I always watch them. They're like, I was like, oh my gosh, this team is super boring to watch because they just do the same thing every game. And I don't think you can say that from their LPL play. Like kind of piggybacking on what Kelsey said, I just think that they really are trying.
All right, then let's move on to an amazing team, one that's shown so much growth in their time here.
Does this team happen to have a player named Amazing on it? No.
Should we? I was actually
because there are 2 of those in this league.
I was thinking about, you know what? It was supposed to be a sarcastic move on towards Masters 3, but do we even want to talk about Masters 3? It's the real question.
I think we should.
You guys should decide. Okay.
We should. It's just it's a really hard team to talk about.
Yeah.
They're really. I feel like it's sad because I feel like the analysis boils down to instead of having a good game every 2 weeks, Dada has a good game every set. So he has like one good game and one bad game like every BO2. So
yeah.
And then Looper has deepened his champion pool. He still has like some really awkward teleports, and their bottom lane is still really bad. And I hate SMLZ because like the only way he ever gets kills is if you literally fall on his auto attack.
Yeah.
So I don't understand. But yeah, I think it just comes down to the fact that Condi plays really well on the current jungle champions. He's really strong, so if he has like a solo laner that shows up in a given match, then they can win a game.
Okay.
Or 2.
And so they have a bad bottom lane. They have both inconsistent solo lanes, and then they have Condi. And so the real question is,
who's only consistent in that he's good on specific champions.
Yep.
Yeah.
And so, where does the future lie with this team? Is there any faith with it? Do you feel like this team can really go forward in terms of resolving any, not even just their consistency issues, but even just being able to close out a lead without having to just snowball off of consistent team fight after team fight? It's horrible to watch. But
yeah, like them watching Masters 3 try to close the game is just.
Is there any? Is this team just stagnant? Is there any room for growth, or at least do they have room for? I don't know.
Past last split, I haven't paid as much attention to Master 3 games because I should probably pay more attention to Master 3 games, but I usually find them boring, so I just noticed the standings. I said, oh wow, they're tied for 3rd. I should maybe pay more attention. But last split, I did notice that in their drafting and in their design, they actually had a few games where they had some really smart counters to their opponents in mind. So just in terms of their compositional design, like when they went against LGD, obviously the key to beating LGD is to counter their minion control. So they just picked like really big minion control champions. Like they had like Lysandra and then something in mid with a lot of wave control. Obviously, I remember this game very distinctly, but they just kept countering their shove like throughout the game, and they were really diligent about that. So it makes me think that there is some depth and dimension to this Master 3 lineup. And they're also like one of the first teams to ban out Snake, for example. They were one of the first teams to sort of figure out how to use Callista effectively. Mm-hmm. So there's more to this team than just Odada and Looper showing up. Like that was a very simple breakdown, but it's just hard to say because I just think Master 3, one thing that's always been true of them is they're inconsistent.
Yep.
Yeah.
So
it's so wild too. I don't know. And I know that it's like kind of like the circle jerk to say like, oh, if Dade feels like being old Dade, they'll win, but it still is kind of true. And I also feel like Looper is probably one of the like lower half top laners. I mean, I don't know. And
he has been doing better.
He's doing better, and then like I don't know, like literally everyone on that team is inconsistent, except I feel for like SMLZ, who's just like usually bad all the time. but like, yeah, I don't know.
He's not bad. He's risk averse.
No, he's bad. No, I don't know.
It's weird.
Okay, so go on.
And I was just gonna say, like, looking at the top. So looking at the top 8 teams, like if you look at the standings right now, the teams that would make playoffs would be EDG, QG, Snake, Invictus Gaming, Masters 3, OMG, Vici, and LGD. And of all of those teams, I feel like you can go through every lineup, like even Qiao Gu to some extent, and you can say, okay, this is what this team has to do to succeed, or like this is their team identity, but in spite of just saying, oh, Dade and Looper have to show up, like, I don't really see that from Masters 3 at all. Like, I don't feel like they have a certain style that fits them really well,
How about we take Condi and put him on LGD and see what happens?
Yes, that's perfect.
Oh my god.
This plan cannot
fail. We can switch junglers, and we can see how big of an impact Condi has on M3, and we can also see if putting a stronger jungler on LGD will just take away all of the intelligent things about them. Like, we can conduct this experiment, so.
Or if Masters 3 is smart enough to, like, figure their crap out because they have, like, a really, really bad jungler.
Knowing our luck, all the good things all of the amazing things that, like, you look at it on paper, you're like, holy moly, this team's problems would be resolved, and you realize what ends up happening is this team becomes infinitely more stupid. We're all amazing players. Do we need to look at the mini-map?
That seems familiar. I think there was a team that was like that last split that also had a 3-letter acronym and maybe a few more Chinese players on it. Okay.
Oh my god. I'm sad I even went that route. That's the worst joke. I was like, while saying, oh my god, I wanted to stop myself just strangling. So, okay, let's get on to Masters 3. Every single time I want to move on to the subject, I look at it. And honestly, let's talk about the consistency of Looper. Is Looper consistent because he's actually picking his shit up, or is the top lane pool in China just a lot easier to, I guess, like capitalize? Is it easier to be consistent in the top lane right now?
Well, there are so few top laners in LPL who are actually top laners.
Yeah,
so.
That's what I mean. It's like, okay, I mean, I always just thought Looper didn't look very good, and I do think he's doing better now, but that's the issue I have with judging Looper, is it feels like top lane is just like an easier environment now because of all these transitions going on. So I don't know if it's really fair to say he's improved.
Same time.
But then again, his team fighting is better, so I mean, maybe, I don't know. I guess you can gauge that rather objectively, but
I think we lost some top lane talent with the transitions, but we also had like some influx. Like I think Long and V are stronger than some of the other top laners that we had last split. So, I mean, they're
good, yeah.
It's weird, but you sounded so they're good, yeah.
They're good, but it's like it's like they're good. They're good top laners. I like them. But then it feels like we've definitely dialed back our expectations in the sense of what really makes a top lane.
What did we lose? Okay, we lost Carry and Go Going, right? Okay.
Yeah.
Go Going
Yeah, Joe's
was
playing like shit now.
So
So
Go Going was playing badly.
Yeah, he was.
Go Going was
so is
struggling.
Young right now.
Go Going was
And-
struggling, but like he was probably better than Xiang. Okay, I'll give you that. But then
True. Yeah, even
Yeah.
when he slept. Like,
No,
Young literally died this week, just like
Yeah.
missing a hook onto a wall and just wandering into the jungle
Yeah,
and dying. It's
Xiang-
like, what the fuck?
I don't really understand what's going on with Xiang right
And
now.
then there's Cola. There's Cola.
But
Who's-
then, but then we got like, and we
But then
switched
you have
Carry
Inc.
for Dandy, and Dandy has, I don't know how to even judge Dandy. His style is kind of weird. It's like old Go Going style, in a strange way, except extreme. And then we have, but then we have Long and V, and that's like better than some of the bottom top laners that we had before.
Yeah.
Like, oh, okay, Amazing
You
J.
still have Amazing J.
Amazing J
Yeah,
got
we lost
owned by
Koro,
inSec. Like, what is that?
We basically lost Koro. We've just been seeing a lot more Amazing J.
Amazing J.
Jamazing J.
Amazing J.
Jamazing A. Okay.
Amazing J
Okay.
is like, what? On Energy Pacemaker, my jungler was just always in this bush. I don't understand. Why are you on the other side of the map, Clear Love? This is not what I signed up for.
I demand for more. Alright. So let's just probably move on before I just make myself sad. King. Wow, that's making me.
I know, right?
That was,
We're gonna make this
that's the opposite.
literally the most depressing team in the league.
Yeah.
So King, alright, let's get into this. The sad life of King players.
Sad.
We're gonna
life.
be this one's gonna be a long one, I suppose, because we're gonna be talking about the specific players, how they're doing, etc. So let's get off with this. King, they faced UP and Demacia Cup. How did that go? Start with Kelsey, since you were dying all night.
I
pretty
watched
much.
it.
Yeah.
I made myself watch all 4 games.
That was the most depressing. I had to stop at some point.
Yeah, it was just such a depressing series. So,
Mhm.
first game went really well for King. They got Sivir. They had, like, even though Zero literally missed every single Dark Binding, like, I was counting them, it was just, okay, there's one. There's another one. Good stuff. inSec was really underwhelming, but at least he tried. And Quip played Gragas, which isn't anywhere near the level of his Rek'Sai, but it was fine. And then, I don't know, Korn played Azir, which was painful. But they had Sivir. And Name had a really good laning phase, really strong, amazing laning phase, and they just managed to win because at least like Zero could pop his ult and do disengage, and Zero is part of their team fight shot calling and things like that.
Yeah.
Second game, okay.
Yep.
Korn picks Echo, which his Echo in LPL has been pretty good, right? Like, you're sighing with relief. It's not Azir, thank God. Okay, this is good. This is promising. He
Looking
goes
good already.
into jungle, level 1, immediately the enemy jungle level 1 by himself, okay? So it's not like I don't know if there was a miscommunication and he was expecting his team to follow after him or what.
Yeah. Level 1.
Level
Enemy
1.
jungle.
And he
Himself.
immediately starts attacking Amy. So he's also broadcasting his location. Like, he's deep on the other side. So it's, like, on the other side of Wolf Camp. So he's not, like, as he's there, stopping at any point and thinking, my team isn't backing me up yet. Maybe I should go back. He's just, like, starts attacking Amy. Then, Punished, who is playing Kassadin, shows up and immediately kills him. So this is bad, because you just gave, like, a level 1 Kassadin a kill.
Yeah.
He goes to lane, and he ends up 2 levels behind Kassadin when Kassadin is level 4. And he's level 2, and he's like, oh, I got my level 2 ability. I can trade now. He immediately dives in and dies again.
Yeah.
So, I don't know if, like, we can say his jungler baited him, because his jungler did show up, but it's like, okay, why are you even bothering to be in that lane? Because, like, seriously, Name is playing Corki, just go bottom, have him push out the wave, like get the bottom tower, come back mid, force like with a group and take that tower. But no, they just he shows up and then Korn immediately dives in, which then you have a level 4 Kassadin with 2 kills. And
so there was literally a moment, and this is beautiful, because of course the matchup with Kassadin versus Echo is fairly, it's early on, it's even, it kind of favors Kassadin a little bit. But like if he gets the lead, obviously, okay, that's bad for the most part. And so like, okay, you can get the gank, but wait a minute, it's Nunu. And who is Nunu is I don't want to say it's not good, but like learn how to play certain champions differently. Like if you like not every champion is a Rek'Sai, so if you don't have gank pressure, don't gank. It's a sad thing that happens with him. And so he gets frozen, like the lane just gets frozen on him completely. He is down like 50, 40 CS, somewhere around there. It's a sad life. It is, and you realize, and you can tell there's a communication going on because like, Name gets Sheen first on Corki, which is like rare, and so you can just tell that like, okay, immediately Hui goes bot, and then they just take the tower, and you like that gets communicated, but the damage more or less has already been done. So, sad life. What happened in the rest of the game? What happened in Game 3?
I don't know. Maybe a certain player decided he no longer wanted to play. I actually don't know why, but Sync Dream decided it was suddenly in the support position. Which, if you listen to their teamfight comms during LPL, Zero is a big part of their teamfight shot calling. So, you could see this reflected in their really terrible teamfighting for the rest of the series, and it was just a... And then, of course, Sync Dream, right? Sync Dream's only good champion is Morgana. It's like, oh, this is perfect! That's what Zero was playing and failing at hitting Dark Bindings from the first 2 games anyway. But no, Heart, being an intelligent human being, denies the Morgana pick, and... Then Sync Dream goes to Nautilus, which is extremely underwhelming also. So on top of that, and then you're just sitting here thinking and realizing that with all the trolling Zero does, including the Quicksilver Sash plus Guardian Angel before Mikhail's builds on Thresh in LPL against Edward Gaming, literally Name's greatest allies on that team are his jungler who only plays Rek'Sai and his top lane inSec.
Yeah.
That is life.
Say what you want about inSec, but he really wants to play, okay?
He really wants to play. The question is, do we want him to?
That's always the question.
I could almost hear, like, God, when I saw the because this was the game that I didn't watch. But when I saw the champion select, I almost heard the theme of, like, Red Wedding, when you see the Yasuo top lane pick, and it was like, you started to realize, this is not a good sign.
Oh my god, that last game. Oh, I totally forgot about the last game draft. Oh my god.
Last game in Korea. I keep mentioning this because it's the most. I love talking about this. I really do. It's my favorite memory of inSec. Is the last game he had in Korea, where he went Yasuo jungle, and there was literally a point in the game in which he was 0-7-1. Last game, and it was in Masters or something. So it was like, well. And so now you see him playing top lane Yasuo, and it just like makes a full circle. It just comes right back. That's
actually like his best win rate top lane champion right now, so don't even kid yourself.
Oh, please. Don't even.
Actually, he's 2-0 on Vlad, so it's probably not accurate.
Yeah, he's apparently a hidden Vladimir god.
Yeah, he dumpsters Amazing J with Vladimir. Daily, so...
Sad life for them, but
yeah, they picked Yasuo top, Fizz jungle, Echo mid.
Yeah.
In the last game.
And so since the support,
Tristana 80 carry too. So
since Zero's losing faith, since Korn has not been playing the best, inSec is just inSec, and Hui needs a single or like maybe 2 champions. What does this mean for Name? How has Name been playing throughout the season, and what does this mean for him? I suppose. Ask. And before I ask this to Michael, I'm going to ask this to Michael, but first of all, can someone give me mod in the chat?
I gave you mod in the chat already.
Oh man, I'm so glad I don't have that open.
Oh, I'm a mod. Okay, perfect. Thank you. Okay, let's talk about it. Mike, what happened?
What are we talking
What's
about?
What's going on with Name?
Oh, Name?
Yeah,
well,
how has he been doing throughout the split?
Okay, even though Name is still particularly targeted against and everybody tries to screw him over as hard as humanly possible, I still don't think he's as good as he used to be in terms of like just how perfect he had been in the past with positioning and summoner usage and stuff. I still think he's really good, but the way he's playing like almost looks as though he's not exactly motivated, which I can't exactly fully blame him for. Like being in his position really sucks because he's kind of got that like Dyrus thing going on in half of his games where like he literally can't play because of the way just because of like the way the teams play against him. But I also feel like it's also kind of self-sabotaging just because of the type of champions he plays and the playstyle he plays, like where he's always very positional oriented and not so much overly reliant on self-sufficient AD carries.
Yeah.
And now you see him obviously forced to play things like Sivir and stuff like that, which is, I think he's good at that, but not really exceptional, and I still prefer to see him on champions like Jinx when permitted, but it's just like he gets so abused that he can't really utilize his strengths as a player, I feel like. So in other words, I feel like people have a good enough read on him to where he's not able to do the things he used to be able to do, but not just because they have a read on him, but because he's also just not to where he was as a player before. But I do think that he still is really good given the team that he's placed on. So,
Okay.
Yeah, I'm not arguing he's the best AD carry in the league, but
he's still up. I think he looks deceptively bad in the games just because of what he has to go through in the games that he plays.
I don't know, even the Reddit comments are starting to be like, at least Name is playing well now. Things like that.
Like,
so
I feel like if you actually watch most of the LPL games, at the very least, like you have to have some sympathy for Name, just watching King games, if nothing else. But
it's just, and it's not just Name, right? That's really sad because I do feel like inSec is actually trying, even if he's not. And then inSec was like always at his peak was still a really great player, right? And then like even Korn, like we've done nothing but trash Korn all episode, but Korn always used to have at least like a couple solid champions that he could play really well, and he could like outplay even like Godby on some of those champions. And and of course Zero, not caring. Like literally if you go to his op.gg Korean account, he's changed his name to AD user only. Okay. He plays only AD carries and Diamond 1 solo queue. And he duos with and he plays a lot of ARAMs with Mafa. This is like his life. So, I don't know. It's really strange and sad because I was really excited about that bottom lane, and I feel like because of circumstances we just never got to see it, and then Zero just gave up.
Yeah.
So we got to see it for a couple weeks. I felt it was like really solid, but
not a team that will. I guess the team needs a massive shift to really be able to.
they'll probably, like, if any luck, they'll just get relegated. Zero will get to go wherever he wants to go. I don't know where, and I don't know, probably his closet and crying. Like, and then some team will pick up Name if he still gives a shit after that.
Yep.
But,
and so, not really much of a.
Sad.
Yeah.
It's a sad life.
Just
It
how
is.
I feel.
yeah,
Whereas, like,
sure
I feel
that
like
was,
inSec is just gonna keep playing until, like, no team wants him.
I actually heard that he wanted to retire before the split, but
I remember hearing that, but then now, like, I don't know, he seems to be really trying, even though, you know, hit or miss. Very, very hit or miss.
poor inSec.
I'm sure he can make it into the streaming business.
Yeah,
'cause
probably.
He's quite the personality as is.
He has a nice personality. He's very well known.
Yeah. So I mean, I don't know. Like King, I still think that even though they're really not a good team, to put it lightly, I don't think they're as bad as their rank dictates. Just because they did have to play without Zero and inSec for a while.
I mean,
I mean, it's still
It's
still pretty bad, but
I think, like, after watching the Demacia Cup set, then it was, like, literally, like, watching the team combust in slow motion. I feel like they're not going to pick up the pieces very easily, and they are the worst team right now. So, I don't know. Maybe it was just Demacia Cup, so Zero didn't feel like giving much of a shit at all.
Yeah.
And they'll play better next week, but we'll see.
I mean, the other thing is, like, they all really, like, if they want to have any chance, like, they all have to really try hard. And even then, it's just almost like an insurmountable point amount to make playoffs and avoid getting relegated.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so
I don't know. Part of me really, I don't know. Maybe it's just personal, but part of me really doesn't want to rate them as the worst team. But now that I'm like thinking of all the teams involved, I'm like, okay, maybe there's literally no team worse.
Well,
than
because at least
really
WE
depressing.
is like they can
like
have
they have
games where
more
Spirit
players,
can carry,
I feel like,
and
that's the other thing. Like when Name was really good on positive energy, and he was hard carrying the team with like a decent jungler and a good support at the time. I say decent. Until summer, he was probably the best jungler in LPL. But AD carries were much stronger in the meta then. Right now, it's just so difficult to carry as an AD carry. Like, look at some of these teams with really strong AD carries, and like Cloud9 is at the bottom when arguably their strongest carry is going to be Sneaky. Like, Forgiven, like Gambit and Copenhagen Wolves are at the bottom in EU LCS. Just a lot of these teams with really, really powerful AD carries are suffering because they don't necessarily have other serious threats, if you will. We have inSec and Corn, but really.
They're literally like tower killing bots or a move speed button. I mean, that's what it comes down to.
Like inSec, he's always been like that kind of player who like draws aggression, right? But if there's like not another carry threat on the team, like if there's like no one to distract from, like they're just gonna kind of leave him alone, and then his entire role on the team becomes kind of useless because everyone's just like camping Name.
Yep. It's just like, I don't know. That's why it's really hard to put any harsh judgment on Name, because it's not like you can pick up 80 carries right now like in Season 2 and like pull a Spirit. It just doesn't work that way. Like, it's literally impossible within like the abilities your characters have
and
the damage.
Epic deft outplays. That's all I care about.
That was really sick.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not gloating because I do really like deft, but just the fact that Name has gotten so much shit. It was nice to see him be competitive with the 80 carry that replaced him and do extremely well even in counter matchups on paper like Sivir Corki. So.
And so, okay, we should probably dial it back, go back in time. Time warp, everybody! Where World Elite was an amazing we were still...
No, that's too far back.
Please, no.
But Qiao Gu's coach, current head coach, was the coach of World Elite, and they had a mid laner named Ninja. Now, reason why I'm bringing this up, and I can't really find a smooth, I guess, like a smooth kind of take to this one, because it's kind of like now we're talking about NA essentially, because Ninja was on the World Elite, got replaced by Xie, and is now finally played his first game in NA, did really well. So what was Ninja? How did he play? And what was his play style? I think we should talk about. So let's start off with the textbook. Kelsey, how is he? The literal textbook.
I mean, we saw one game. It's like we're talking about 24 games that happened in the LPL regular season, and Ninja has played one game in North American LCS, or 24 games per week, excuse me. So it's really hard to judge his performance. I guess like they felt the need to gank him. Helios felt the need to gank him a lot, so obviously he is a primary carry on TDK of some kind. No. I'm not really sure why that happened. I think in general he team fought pretty decently, but that's sort of always been his thing, is like playing control AoE mages. And he, like, I really like the Sivir Victor composition, which they use a lot, where you have Sivir, because Sivir allows Victor to get into position much more easily because he doesn't have like a gap close and he can just drop his spells. And it worked fairly decently, so. They beat Dignitas! who
Yay.
some kind of
Yeah.
shining gods or something. I'm not sure.
Yeah. I didn't get to watch that game because my NALCS experience this weekend was like, turn on NALCS, watch Smithy die at random, minimize NALCS. But like in terms of like Ninja historically, I mean,
Yeah.
a lot of people were really bitter just because, or a lot of people were really bitter about Ninja in the past just because, like he was literally a downgrade to World Elite's. Wait, was it Sukum and then Ninja directly after?
Yeah, I was
Trying to remember.
Sukum
Yes,
Ninja.
because a lot of people figured or thought that Sukum was better, which I tend to agree with, and I also think that he had better jungle synergy. But at the same time, like when Ninja finally stopped playing, I think he was actually at his peak. So he actually did turn out to become really good near. Well, not really good, but he became a respectable player near the end of his time in World Elite. But for the majority of it, he was just kind of. He just kind of like existed in the lane and then occasionally showed up for team fights, so he wasn't all that good. So
Yeah.
I don't know. Well, I don't know if he's kept the same motivation in terms of his NA play.
Yeah.
But I don't know. There was never really anything overly spectacular about him that stood out. So, but I mean, he also had to, like, honestly, before him, World Elite had like insanely good mid laners, like during their entire time as a team. So it's also. It kind of automatically puts him in a negative light too, but at the same time, I still can't like rate him very highly among the world's best mid laners or anything like that. So he's just like a mid laner that exists. He's there, and it's not even really like a Chinese player going to North America technically. So
All
it's
right,
not
yeah,
really all
true.
that. Yeah. So
That's something I often forget. So
You just adopted Ninja. Like,
Yeah,
Yeah.
I just kind of adopted Ninja. I took his sins as my own.
oh,
No.
so
clever.
here's the question, Emily. It's gonna be a nice one. So the thought, or like the predominant thought, is that Ninja failed in China and is now more or less coming to NA to, I guess, more or less prove his worth. So how did he do? What was the real reason for him getting replaced? Or I suppose it depends on what the definition of real reason is in this scenario. But why do you think he got replaced? And how do you think he was coming together as a player? And do you think he relies on any form of jungle pressure to, like, I guess, to
I think
do well in the lane?
I think he does. I think the thing that's a bit unfair about the way people evaluate Ninja is that, like, and Kelsey can probably back me up on this because all my research is, like, kind of recent for a couple of articles I wrote on WE. But, like, he actually asked, I believe, to step down from that position. Like, he said that he, like, right before IAM, where they had that, like, miraculous, win over GE Tigers before losing to TSM in the finals. He actually asked to step down from the team, and then like Xie replaced him, obviously, and then like everyone was saying, oh, the team got like exponentially better, but like first of all, I don't think that. I don't know. Evaluating both Ninja and Xie, I think that they're, even though they have like slightly different champion pools, I think they're really similar players, and that they're good at winning lane. They're not really, like, I'm not super impressed with either of their team fighting prowess. I don't think, like, I honestly think that Ninja, like, he was playing, Ezreal, he had, like, a couple of Anivia games, like, Kassadin, like, before he was swapped out, like, I didn't think that was probably, like,
Choga.
Mike said the best he was playing, like that entire split. So I think it's really unfair to say that, oh, like, because Ninja left, suddenly WE transformed into this, like, amazing team, because first of all, that's actually not at all what happened. And then second of all, it's, I mean, evaluating him as a player, he's just kind of, even now, always there. Like, I don't even think he did as much damage as Seraph in that game. In terms of comparing Seraph's Vladimir to his Victor.
Okay.
So,
I think the thing to note about Ninja is that he was ramping up with a champion pool that arguably didn't suit the meta at the time, and is more meta comfortable now with more control mages and things. And he used to actually really be a big Jace player too in 2014. Like, he played a lot of Jace, which was kind of awkward since it wasn't a huge meta pick. And he played some Twisted Fate, things like that. Like, that was the really awkward thing, is that they almost literally came off of their plane from Korea and went into their first match on WE and decided to play a Twisted Fate comp with a language barrier. It's like, this is awesome. This is the best thing I've ever seen. But no, I think when I say, I actually think he's a little bit better at team fighting and a little bit worse than Lin and Xia. If I would say that, like, I think he's more team fight oriented just based on his champion pool. Mm-hmm. He really the thing I would say about Ninja that has been his advantage is that he doesn't necessarily win lane if he doesn't have good jungle pressure. That if he does have good jungle pressure, and I think probably his most successful time on WE was when they were using Old B, actually, because Old B and him had that synergy from being on a team together before. And Old B would just, like, repeatedly gank his lane, and he would snowball, and then he'd be able to use that well in team fights.
Mm-hmm.
So I think he has some different strengths and weaknesses to Xia, but overall they're about similar skill level. And I know the Chinese fans, like, get upset when I say this, because Xia has, in theory, a higher mechanical skill ceiling. He's been number 1 in the Chinese ladder repeatedly. I just feel like Xia's biggest barrier is converting, like, his win lane, win game type strategy into a competitive setting outside of, for example, LSPL, where he was very successful. And that's been something that he's struggled with a lot. Whereas Ninja, I think, is much more team oriented, but doesn't necessarily, but at the same time can inhibit the rest of your team by requiring more jungle pressure.
Okay.
And I also, like, just to underscore the fact that the team didn't suddenly get better by his removal, like, the week that he joined the team, or 2 weeks before, they actually went 3-3. And some of those games were, they 2-0'd Invictus Gaming, right? And that's a significant team, and they went 1 with Vici Gaming. So those are not, like, small teams. And the reason why he eventually broke down and asked to be replaced is because the subsequent week they went 0-2 to Master 3 when they didn't expect to. And part of that was when Master 3 was hitting their stride in Kalista. Ninja cited his champion pool, a bunch of other stuff, and Xia's champion pool definitely suited the meta better then. I also think the reason why he was replaced had more to do with their bottom lane, because their AD carry sub was Korean, so obviously they couldn't use Mystic with Ninja in the mid lane. And their AD carry sub at the time was STYZ, who I think was, he did not have a good split. I don't know if it was like a morale issue, partly a champion pool issue because he couldn't play the Caitlyn and Ezreal, partly a I don't have PYL as my support anymore issue. So yeah, I think that was a bigger factor as opposed to Ninja himself being the problem with the old WE lineup.
Okay. Alright, so I think we pretty much hit everything that we wanted to talk about. Is there any teams, or let's say games specifically, that people want to touch on before we sign out? Let's start with Michael, actually.
Michael, actually.
Could be a nice last name.
Okay. Okay, I don't really have a game I want to point out, but I do want to add the caveat that although the standings look closer than they've ever been, and teams are closing in on EDG, I don't know if that's like a thing to be concerned about or a thing to celebrate, but I still feel like if EDG just ran Pawn Goro the whole time, the gap would be still pretty large between them and everyone else. And I almost am a little bit concerned about the fact that they've been using Amazing J and Bamey and kind of, you know, like we said before in multiple episodes, the whole strength behind the team is the fact that they're always, like, so well, like, put together, and that's like their strong point, which is essentially eradicated with the new experimentation they're doing. And the fact that they're doing that and still first place is like good for EDG, but kind of concerning for LPL as a whole, I feel. So, I don't know. That's just something I've been thinking about. It's like, how are they still first place doing this?
Because everyone is doing shit like that too, so... I mean, not necessarily swapping out players, but... I don't know. Like,
Trying out random stuff.
Snake's random poke comps and shitty builds, like Invictus Gaming deciding not to listen to their coach when they're doing drafts, and...
Yeah, I guess everybody's having that struggle, but I still think it's like kind of concerning that they're still first with that. Like, I understand if they were like still like top 4, but I don't know.
To be fair, they've played one more series than Qiao Gu has, and they're 1 point above Qiao Gu. So Qiao Gu, in theory, could overtake them with like just one more series if they get 2-0.
And I guess it really comes down to playoffs to see if the same value is met with each of these, like with the regular season games. So right now, I guess players and teams aren't taking the games as seriously just because of all you need is playoffs, lol. So, but once you get to the playoffs, is that obviously I feel like the expectation is that the culture will change, or like the teams themselves will obviously take the games a lot more seriously because it has worlds implication. But we'll see. How good is China? That's the real question.
They've also made a statement about how Pawn will be back either next week or the week after. So they'll be using Pawn more. I think they'll probably... And I think the implication is also they'll be using Korra more in the second half. But, yeah. I mean, I think they only lost the one UP game with both Pawn and Korra present. I'm not sure. I think that was the only game they lost with their MSI lineup. Because one game they had, I think, Amazing J and Pawn. And one game they had Korra and Pawn.
Okay. So, Kelsey, do you have anything you want to add before we close out?
About the games?
Yeah.
I would say the game to watch for me this week, I actually really enjoyed the first game of LGD versus Unlimited Potential. I think LGD had quite a few interesting series. Also, I actually really enjoyed the LGD versus Qiao Gu Game 3 from Demacia Cup. Was really good. Imp had really strong kiting in that series, because we saw like the Cassidon and Nocturne comp completely wreck EDG, but because Imp kited so well as Vayne, it wasn't as successful against LGD, so it was interesting.
Okay. Emily?
I would go and watch, aside from the games that everyone else already mentioned, the second game of the LPL set between Qiao Gu and LGD. And again, LGD did have, like, first of all, just a lot of games this week, but then also a lot of really interesting games. And I thought that was like a good indication of what the team can do when they're kind of firing on all cylinders. And Qiao Gu definitely, like, they don't have a bad game either. So it's a good testament to their strength. If I remember correctly, TBQ does play Lee Sin, so there's that. You get to see him on, like, his strongest champion, so... but it was cool. It was cool to see that team come out and have a game where they're playing against a tough opponent, and that opponent plays well, and they play, better. So, it was good. It was a good game.
Such low standards.
I know.
Alright.
Watch Qiao Gu versus Fichi for Twisted Fate lessons from Patong.
For the lulz. Oh my gosh, Qiao Gu. Oh my god. Oh, the join B1v3 was definitely my favorite.
That was fun to watch.
Oh my gosh, that was hilarious.
He puts down the Lulu for a game and he's like, alright, I got this.
I got this TP Morgana, let's go.
TP Morgana. Oh my god, that mid lane play was so stupid.
Yeah, exactly. That's what we're talking about, because he played Twisted Fate and it was like, okay. This is awesome. And then World 6 fails his body slam over the wall. Yeah. That was excellent.
Just sits there and he's like, alright, I'm just going to flash over this. Alright, everybody. It was a fun episode. Let's do shoutouts, starting with Emily.
I guess shout out to LL Esports. It's still right there. I recently wrote about Snake, which was fun. I got to talk about how much I love that team, and I actually really like what I wrote, which is kind of rare. So
You really suck at selling yourself. You're like, oh, it's really rare that I write anything worth reading. I'm actually just like a terrible writer. Don't read my stuff. I only write about teams that I like, but it usually sucks anyway. It's really rare that I write about teams that I like and that are really, and the writing is really good. So no, Emily is a really good writer. You should go to llesports.com and read her writing. So there you go.
Alternate career choice for Emily is a boxing promoter. Hey, you know, my boxer here is horrible. You shouldn't fight him. Just don't even waste your time. It's a free win. It's just all right. So all right, Kelsey.
Yeah. Shout out to the Score Esports. I recently did both a European LCS and LPL midseason review. If you want to see which players that I picked for best performance in their role and yell at me about it, the European squad already did that, so feel free to do that for LPL as well.
Alright, perfect. And Michael?
Yeah, shoutouts to the panelists, obviously, and Esports Heaven, and also shout out to Kelsey's gold distribution article series, because that's an unprecedented level of patience that went into that fucking article. Holy shit. That shit is so good. That's I don't know. I was nerdgasming over that series, that entire article series, so check it out because it's super good.
Yep. Really solid stuff. And I guess shout out to Team Dignitas. About it. Yay. Yay!
Raz is a really good coach. You should watch Team Dignitas EU and the EUCS. You should also visit Esports Heaven, where Michael Drexen Laylor, whose name I can't even pronounce, does a really good job mentoring new writing talent.
Yeah, and then about once a month, you'll see something with my name be published.
Yeah, I'm writing the high of that OMG article. It's just that one just keeps on giving.
Just carrying me the whole time, man. I mispronounced that name so much I had to add that little how to pronounce your name feature on Facebook where you click the speaker and it spells it correctly or it enunciates it correctly. It's pretty bad.
Yeah.
And yes, Broken Shard is the coach. So, anyways,
well, you're the analyst.
Yeah.
You share equal duty.
Just say you're a coach to sound cooler.
Yeah, I mean, I think I'll talk to Broken Shard. I'm sure he's fine with it, with getting no credit.
Of course.
Yeah.
So, alright guys, let's end the show with a nice little wave. The greatest ending ever.
I got the fruity one. This doesn't.
He Rek'Sai ults across the map and just dies.
So Michael, LGD, do you think it's a problem in the sense that do you think TBQ is one of the only issues that's plaguing the team? Or do you think it's something else adding to it?
I think TBQ is a large part of it, but I wouldn't peg him as the only issue. I feel like in comparison to last season, and again, this is within the context of the fact that LGD always seems a bit off in the regular season compared to playoffs, so I'm still holding out for them, and as mentioned earlier, the standings are all really close, so it's kind of hard to tell who would beat who on any given day. They did split both of their sets this week, so but I don't know, I feel like the problem I see with LGD is that maybe they're overcommitted to plans, because I never see them really do okay. They're either really, really good or really, really bad. And I actually feel like there was a few games this week where PYL wasn't actually playing particularly well either. I don't know if it was a miscommunication thing or not, but yeah, I don't think it's just him. I think it's I don't think it's just TBQ. I think it's a bit of the team as a whole. I still think that in terms of how they team fight and play together, they still have some really smart ideas, the way that Wayless is utilizing AD carries for the team, like Varus, and their team play is actually really good and stuff like this. So there's times where there's little brilliant moments, for instance, Imp would use Blue Trinket and Wayless would follow up with arrows over walls and stuff, so use temporary vision to poke him down before fights. So they still have stuff like that, but and their macro game is usually really good. So LGD still comes across as the smartest team, but I don't know. I feel sometimes their individual play is lacking a little bit, but it's not on a consistent basis. It's it seems to be on and off. So
yeah.
But yeah, I still think TBQ. I think it is true that to some extent, like TBQ does formulate the team to work together to compensate for his errors, especially like he's a little more self-sufficient nowadays, but like LGD used to just kind of like follow him around and to make plays and stuff like that to make sure he doesn't fuck up. But at the same time, I don't necessarily think that's all on TBQ. I think that's partially PYL planning around TBQ because like we saw TBQ on LGD without PYL for that week, and it was like completely different. So I don't know.
I like how the one game they won, he played Lee Sin and like stepped up to carry. He was like, "We're winning this game."
Yeah,
We're not
so
gonna go win that.
And so anybody who doesn't understand the context in which, like for instance, Godby playing AD carry, like the Demacia Cup games did have a rematch between LGD and Qiao Gu, and LGD took the match set pretty cleanly, 3-1. So that was fun. So yeah, Emily, what were you about to say?
Oh no, I was just gonna say, like, I think for me, it's more, I really want, because, so probably a bit of my own bias, but, like, I really love LGD, and I want them to be a team that, like, can go to Worlds and do well. And I think I just see, and I know I always harp on this, but I just see the jungle matchup as something that's, like, super, super important. So once you get into, like, once they get into playoffs, and once they get into possibly an international setting, like how well they'll do then with TBQ on the team, which is why I think like I am so hard on him. I agree that their like actual play style right now and the way like, for example, Godby like kind of morphed into a player who plays like so much more for the team. The way they use their two top laners, I think, is like really, really smart. And like stuff like that. The way Imp has developed, actually, like I'm honestly like more impressed with him in China than I was with him in on.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to episode 49 of Korea. No, I'm trying to talk. So, a lot's happened as usual, and by a lot I mean literally 3 tournaments: LPL, LSPL. We won't be talking about LSPL so far. We'll be talking about it once the regular season has ended, so that'll be next week, I think. So with that, we have Demacia Cup and we have LPL. And first topic will be LGD. All right, so let's start off with LGD here. Great, inconsistent. Who wants to start off the discussion? Oh, actually, you don't have a choice.
Look at this volunteers jump up.
Yeah. You don't have a choice, Emily.
Okay, cool.
Okay.
So LGD, I mean, I think, it stinks because we get this argument, I feel, every week, or like I argue with some people every week about LGD's placement in terms of how people think of them as like whether they're a top team because of where they are in the standings. I think they're a lot better than what their position suggests. Although one thing that stuck out to me when I was looking through like just pulling statistics and looking at LGD as a team is that technically overall they have like almost a 50% record, like if you're not including points. If you're just including, it's like 46%. And in those games, the like of the games that they've won, TBQ, and I know I harp on him all the time, but here we go again. TBQ has played Lee Sin 7 times and he has a 100% win rate, which is like so ridiculous. Like on every other champion, like Rek'Sai is like 25%. Let me see, like what was the other one? Sejuani, and I don't even think he's like a bad Sejuani, to be honest. But like I actually think TBQ
is like a big issue, and I don't understand why they have such a huge talent level on the team and still have him on the team when these issues have had like literally years to flush themselves out. But I don't know.
And LGD has had more than just like PYL showing up late. They've had Wayless being unable to practice as much under doctor order because of problems with his wrist. They've had recently Imp had a little bit of a problem with his visa. He had to, like, they were struggling with it this week. They were actually practicing Godby as ADC just in case in some of their scrims because he had an issue where he stayed too long in China during the grace period. So he had to go to the visa office just to get it sorted out so that he didn't run into problems later.
Yeah, and it's obviously a problem when you have like your injured player subbing for Imp.
Yeah.
Yes.
So
But I mean, they still won a game off Qiao Gu with
Yeah.
that lineup. So.
yeah,
Mm.
And again, they were playing Sivir there because Sivir aids in rotational play, and it's a big weakness of Qiao Gu. So, I mean, we've seen in the past LGD is able to compensate. I almost feel like we are really hard on TBQ, but he's also part of the reason why they're so good, right? Is because they
Yeah.
have to kind of be
Yeah.
more inventive and creative to compensate for some of his issues. Whereas I feel like if they had a strong jungler, they could just play the same style that a lot of other LPL teams play, and maybe they'd still be same in the standings, but they'd lack some of the macro understandings of the early game lane swap power that I think, and like their ability to go for their correct objectives later, and kind of frazzle, for example, unlimited potential in that series. Like Apollo got so freaked out that he decided to suicide or something. I don't know. He was like, "Oh, must
Yeah.
split push."
yeah. I
And
mean,
the
I think
tower
it's
killed him, but
Fine on that champion, but it's only like a 20%. It's absolutely ridiculous the difference when they put him on Lee Sin as when they don't put him on Lee Sin. And like I think a lot of other things can be attributed to like PYL coming back and then regaining their synergy. Obviously, kind of they went 1-3 for their first sets, and when PYL wasn't with the team, and that those are games that I'm sure they'd like to have back, even if they're going to be like trying and testing things out. It still would have been another week where they could have done that. Because like when I think of their record, I actually just almost completely throw out those games. Like unfortunately they count, but like they weren't the same team. Like they're losing games with PYL is still completely different than losing games without PYL. But like the TBQ win rate is just staggering. Like they cannot find another champion for him to have nearly as much impact on as Lee Sin, and it's. I mean, I can't say that teams are like specifically targeting it even, but it's really like if there's one thing that jumps out to me and is super concerning for LGD, it's that they can't jungle is such an important position and they can't get their jungler to be make any sort of impact on a champion that's not Lee Sin.
All right. Well, do you think that's true? Do you think that's the case? Do you think he, with any other champion, like it feels like kind of a revolving door. Every season, it's always the same. People always question whether or not he's really buffed up his champion pool, and he can play a lot of champions, except the amount he is able to play the champions. The mechanics, like he presses the buttons properly, just.
Are you?
He's just not in the right place sometimes, making the right decisions a lot of the time.
he can jungle. He just